Okay, here we are with this broken transmission bell housing on this C3500 HD. And yeah, I probably could find another case and put all these guts into it and make it run. But I don't have another case and I haven't found another case. So this is my plan. I have this bell housing here off of a SM465 and it's a mirror image left to right. So my plan is I've got some 29-2000 extra long dowel pins, and I'm going to dowel these bell housings together, clean up all the broken pieces, and bolt everything back to this piece so it stays flush, all of the bolt holes stay in line, and then I'm going to TIG weld it. And then I'm going to cross my fingers that it all works. So that's my plan. But I believe that if I use the bottom bolts first and then bolt the top on, and if I ever have to take this transmission out, unbolt the top and then unbolt the sides. Obviously on the automatic, I'm just pointing fingers at these holes. I think that's going to work out just fine for me. It's not like this is a high horsepower application. There's all kinds of gearing in the rear end, and it's not a hot rod. So I've heard stories of hot rodders with 1,000 horsepower running with just a few bolts holding the transmission to the engine. And I believe that if it's tight and if it's aligned well on those dowel holes, I'm going to be just fine. I do, however, need to get this down to a spot where I can get to that bell housing. So I'll probably rig some straps around the frame underneath this transmission and lift it up off this jack and those blocks and then lower it down to the floor somehow. That's my plan. Well, that looks better. There we go. Just kidding. Everything sits together very well, and I'm sure I can't focus very well on. There we go. We can see the crack. Maybe it'll focus. But anyway, all the pieces fit together quite well, and so I have a very good feeling that if I just clean this up, put a good chamfer on all the broken pieces, it'll weld together very well. And bolting it together with all of the bolts in all of the holes will prevent this from happening again. Well, there, it's practically better. I ground all the surfaces that actually touch, and I put a good chamfer on the transmission, and I left all the pieces pretty much square so they would fit better. And then I ground this whole outside area just to keep contaminants away from my weld. So my next job is going to be to bounce around and tack this together and just weld probably 1 inch at a time so it doesn't warp. But I have my dowels in place on this SM465 bell housing, and everything's looking good. Everything's pretty much flush by the feel, so I'm ready to weld. Well, there we go. It's tacked in place, and it took me a little bit of trial and error to get the welder all tuned in, but for the most part, it's getting good penetration, good heat, good welds, and I think if I just keep kind of bouncing around, it will work. And I don't want to put too much heat into one area and crack it again. And being that it's all aluminum and my other bell housing is aluminum, it kind of makes a great heat sink. So I'm going to just keep on doing this, and then when it gets to a point where I can't get behind that bolt head or something like that, I'll just take it loose, do the weld, and watch for the gap to change or not and adjust accordingly. Well, some of the welds are prettier than others, but I've got it done, and I welded the inside as well. I'll show you that. I didn't do that top part. I basically just went as far as I could reach with the torch and made sure I got it all cleaned up. But I got pretty good penetration, and so I'm okay with that. Like I say, I've heard, and people have told me before, that they can put a pretty high horsepower application in with just like 4 of those bolts. So for being a stocker, I think that'll work just fine. Well, I've got that old flex plate off, and I don't believe that I'm going to have that problem anymore. I used purple Loctite. It's service removable is what it's called, or there we go. Now I just need to get those dowels out of the engine so I can use these longer ones and make sure I'm in the good part of that case. Well, with this slide hammer, I was able to drill a hole, not with the slide hammer, but I drilled a dowel. Okay, here we go. I drilled a hole in the dowel and welded the bolt in the hole and used my slide hammer to pull that dowel out. Now I have my longer one in there, if you can see it right there, just above the oil filter. And now I need to do the same thing. Don't get yourself wet. I need to do the same thing on the right side, so that way I will be able to get into the good meat on that transmission case. Well, check that out. Other than the mess on the floor, with some blocking and some strapping, I've got this back in the air, and it's just high enough I can get the transmission jack back underneath it. So I'm going to get this up off the straps, and instead of using those 4x4s to block up the jack and raise the transmission higher, I'm going to end up lowering the truck down to the transmission and resetting my lift safeties. All right. Now the only thing that's holding me back from installing this, and maybe I might have room to with this big truck, but the check this out, the dipstick tube. I picked it up and I just noticed that hairline crack right there by that bracket, and the whole tube's about to break in half. So unfortunately I'm gonna have to call the parts store tomorrow and see if they've got one, whether it's a flexible stainless steel one or if it's just a direct replacement. I need to grab one. So long. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.